Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm always very happy to have the opportunity to be sharing our work and experience with everyone. Not that we thought we're doing very well. We're far from sort of the success, but we probably spent quite a bit of time in doing the work, and there were quite a few barriers and challenges that we thought would be nice to share with everyone, and also to collect your wisdoms and advice on this. So this is beautiful, right? I think by now most of us know that this is the Lychee War village, and we have the very proud village heads with us today. I would like to invite you to look at the setting of the village. You will notice that it's surrounded by very mature forests, and it's absolutely stunning if you are there. And then the next village, again, we have a very proud village representative here today, as in Mui Chi Lam. Now, again, it's pretty similar setting, but 30-minute sort of uphill of Lychee War with the even more mature trees and forests. And we have a project now ongoing there, supported by the CCSF. The name of the project actually is called Forest Village. So you know that's the focus of the habitat management work that we're working on. Now, interestingly, if you look at this diagram, it's explaining how villages in the southern China coastal area usually will be settled. Now, our very smart and clever ancestor will only settle their village or only develop their village at a location that has these features. The first one, of course, is the big mountain at the back. And then at the bottom or mid-hill of the mountain, there has to be mature forest. And in Hong Kong, we call them feng shui wood. Now, it's not anything sort of superstitious, but it's a habitat type that we name these feng shui wood in Hong Kong. And of course, they will then position the village houses in front of the feng shui wood, we're overlooking into the stream as well as the flat area where they can then cultivate for farming purposes. Now, in the case of Lychee War, it's even better because they even have a small sort of front hill, a smaller sized sort of hill in front. And then above and beyond the small hill, it's an open sea area. So this is a very typical setting for many villages in the southern China coastal area, so not just in Hong Kong. Now, I will then bring you, this is a situation also in Japan. Now, our next speaker is from Japan, so I won't go into the detail about it. But it seems like many of the villages in Japan also share the similar type of setting, and they call this the Sentoyama. Now, also our neighbors, Taiwan, they also recognize these kind of interactions between the natural habitats and the activities of the villages. Now, these create, in fact, a lot of challenges when we are attempting to revitalize the villages because the system is very complex. You see a diversity of habitat interacting with the many social, economic, and cultural activities of the villages. And they are basically holistically interacted with one and another. And therefore, when we started our work in Lychee War, we realized that there are three major challenges that we have to tackle. The first one is obviously many of these areas surrounded by country parks, marine park, very high ecological values, and it's basically an ecosystem that embeds the village cultural, social, and economic activities. The second challenge is many of these land areas is privately owned, but many of these ecosystem services or even cultural significance are public goods. So it's shared by many of us in Hong Kong as well as in the Greater Bay Area. Now, how do we then justify the use of public money on, I don't know, something that may facilitate private rights? Is there any ways that we can have strike a balance about this? And obviously, many of us here are city folks. I grew up in the city of Hong Kong. And to be very honest, a lot of us, including policymakers or decision makers, we do tend to have a little bit of this bias towards the urbanizations or the urban development. And that's leading to sort of a silo policy, not just government policy, but investment, corporate policy, etc. So if we are really to look into how are we going to go about doing a sustainable revitalization, these are the few things that we have to tackle. The first one, I would say we have to then look at the approach of the revitalization that we would need to take on board. The second, it's about the mechanism that we are going to pull in, what kind of resource in supporting that revitalization process. And the last one is, in fact, the revitalization intent and vision. Are we revitalizing the village just for the village's sake, or do we have a much bigger and greater goal? Now, because of those very systemic challenges, so our team at Hong Kong U Center for Civil Society and Governance adhere to 3 system approach. The first one is obviously nature-based solutions. Now, nature-based solutions, as it speaks on the screen, is actions to not just to protect and conserve the natural habitats or ecosystem services, but we need to protect them in order for us to resolve the societal challenges that we're facing today. The other system approach that we have adopted is the regenerative production. Now, that's the agricultural method that will help us maintain the soil as well as delivering some of the ecosystem service benefits while looking at the productivity of the crops or farmland. The third and final systems approach that we adopt is we look at it from a sustainable food system sort of picture. Now, the important thing is you can look at the diagram, you will be able to identify it's not just the farmers who are involved in the food system. There's a whole load of stakeholders. Now, if we are to genuinely revitalize the villages, then we have to be able to relate all these 3 types of system with our revitalization work. And how do we do it? In Lai Chi Wo and Mui Chi Lam. Now, the first things when we first enter into the village is that we adopt a catchment approach in biodiversity monitoring. So we were able to survey actually a total of 11 taxa, including butterflies, trees, amphibian reptiles, freshwater fish, etc. Because we need to note about the natural system before we actually do any work on it. And besides that, we were able to invite our civil engineering colleagues from Hong Kong U to also look at the landscape and the hydrology of the site so that we know how are we going to bring in modern technology in simulating some of these hydrological models, and then how are they going to bring back some of the traditional irrigation system the villages once developed 300 years ago. And of course, like what Jackie said in her speech, we also carry out a lot of oral history interviews to understand the interaction, in particular, between some of the cultural activities between the villages as well as the natural system. And you can also look at the background diagram where we were able to also map the different habitat types. Professor Brian Morton actually once in a journal paper said, Lai Chi Wo probably has the last remaining natural successions of different habitats that without any disturbance by artificial construction, from highland forest into woodland, coastal area, etc. So that's what we did actually for 2 years before we actually announced we have a revitalization project there. And then agriculture activities is the fundamental of many of our villages in Hong Kong and in the world. So we thought this has to be maintained as the core activity there. So besides revamping or revitalizing the farmland, we looked into the possible farming methods that can enable us to develop nature-based solutions and regenerative agriculture. So besides the paddy farming that Jackie mentioned, it is now very well taken care of by the Conservancy Association and the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation. Our team at Hong Kong U actually move on and look at other possibilities, and in this case, it's agroforestry. Now, agroforestry is considered as one of the most important nature-based solutions and a tool for regenerative agriculture. It's very interesting because the spirit of agroforestry is that you look at your farm area as a three-dimensional space. So we maintain all the mature and native trees. We don't fell all the trees, we don't clear the field, we keep them there as the shade. And then underneath them, we then plant productive crops. In this case, we've been planting 500 to 700 coffee trees there. And then underneath the coffee tree, we have other species such as turmeric, ginger, as well as papaya tree, etc. So we are using the space three-dimensionally, and that, first of all, create a diverse habitats for more species to use the area. Second, it's very economical if land in Hong Kong is expensive, so you're doing multiple functions using a small patch of land. And of course, productivity. And besides piloting agroforestry methods in Lai Chi Wo, we also design alongside with it, for example, farm trainees program. We also provide funding for rural startups, for those who are interested in following some of our eco-farming approaches, and we provide them with a seed money so that they can start their own farms there. I think I'm quite happy to report to everyone that we now have roughly about 10 farms in Lai Chi Wo. And then, remember I mentioned about the sustainable food system. So it's not just the farmer that we are working with. In Hong Kong, we also start looking at the local agricultural development, and we know there's a need there for food processing. Remote villages like Lai Chi Wo, it's not economical to grow choy sam, bak choy. By the time you ship them to the urban areas, you're probably paying $30 for just 1 catty of choy sam. So we, besides looking for the more economical crops, we established a food factory in Chateau Court. Now, the food factory doesn't just collect the crops from Lai Chi Wo, it's collect the crops from Sangshui, Fanlang, etc. So we're serving the region. And we engaged the women from the community to help with some of this processing work. With these value-added procedures, the produce are being sold at a much higher price. And then along the value chain of the food system, you're able to engage more people. Now, I was trained as a planner, but my husband is a die-hard fans ecologist. So we always talked about how do we mainstreaming about nature conservation and sustainability, etc. This is one very good way to mainstream that concept, because you are asking the consumer to look at all these values when they consume your products. And then, not just opening up a food factory, we were able to set up a platform, inviting many other farms in Hong Kong to join us. And at the platform, we work with many partners. And we have signature crops for every year. For example, this year we have the turnip, 蘿蔔. So we have a very interesting branding campaign called Robert Go, okay, 蘿蔔糕. And so we were in connection with more than 10 farms in Hong Kong, asking them to get prepared because we will be collecting the turnips from each of the farms. And then at the other side of the value chain system, we contact with restaurants, buyers, etc. For example, a very famous kitchen, 劉家廚房, it's the 蘿蔔糕is actually very famous. They are using the turnips that we were able to mobilize from this network. So we're trying to scale up the impact to go beyond Lai Chi Wo and Mui Tze Lam. And of course, as part of the university, we are very keen about transferring our knowledge. So with our coffee farm, with the coffee processing, knowledge that we were able to accumulate, we actually established a seed to farm sustainable coffee course last year. And quite a lot of the F&B industry players are keen to come and learn with us. So we try to share about the benefits of agroforestry. We also talk to a lot of green groups and other social groups about our experience, hoping that besides paddy farming, there are actually also other means to enhance the habitat while allowing a slightly higher productivity returns for some of these villages. Now, I don't have a lot to share about New Zealand because this is still work in progress, but we are looking into establishing a camping ground inside the forest. Now, it is very challenging, and we're still trying to adhere to the nature-based solution, regenerative agriculture, etc. The advanced development of this is that, of course, we're maintaining all the trees. No one single tree will fell for the development of the camping ground. And then we start to have agroforestry. We plant tea trees as well as coffee trees now at the campsite. And then the next will be for us to get the approval from the planning department and town plan board to have some very basic facilities to be placed in place. So that we can really connect the natural habitat, nature conservation, as well as farm productivity, as well as recreational needs of the wider society. So I hope these examples give you some things to think about, and I welcome your comments and suggestions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Law, for your fruitful sharing.